and welcome to the Peer KNF office hour for February 13th, 2022. And today I have a special guest with me. This is Cheryl Mandila. And she's...
Aloha.
Yeah, make sure all our sound's coming good through for you guys. So wanted to start off today with a little bit of I Ching. And before we dive into what we got, I don't have too many questions coming through, so we may end up chatting and having you guys hear what we got to talk about, which might be a good thing. So today, I think this was last week's one as well, but maybe this is just for me and my whole deal of what I'm up to. But today is decrease, and it says, "Be still, lessen the power of the ego, and misfortune will be avoided." So it is a fact of life that times of decrease come upon us. Our resources are limited, difficulty surrounds us, and our egos generate angry and unhappy emotions. Nonetheless, such times are good for us. If we respond to them by quieting our ego and turning sincerely to the higher power for help, we emerge from a period of decrease stronger, healthier, and wiser. When we discover we're unable to achieve our goals, our egos become infuriated. We're tempted to harden into anger and bitterness, to lash out, to desperately and aggressively grab for control over the situation. If we do this, however, we only push our own salvation further away. Ooh. The I Ching counsels us to withdraw into stillness now. The image is that of a spring reverting to the inside of the mountain during a time of drought. By returning to its quiet center during the time of decrease, it avoids evaporating and exhausting itself in vain. You would be you'd be wise to follow this example. To try to force progress by arguing, manipulating, making excuses will only bring your own downfall. Instead, disengage from your inferior elements, however passionately they seek expression, and turn to the sage for guidance and assistance. The hexagram sun issues a call to sacrifice negative feelings, accept the powerlessness of the ego against the currents of life, and return to the contemplation of the principles of the sage. In stillness and meditation, we enrich the higher parts of ourselves and thus bring an end to the decrease.
Nice. Yeah, I've been wondering about how you recharge on a farm, because there's always so much to do, you know. I think different people do it in different ways. Some people believe in the day of rest, right? But how do you do that when the pigs need fed and the chickens and there's duties, you know?
And your day of rest is office hours here with you guys, you wonderful guys, and all this supporting the community. How do you decrease properly? Oh, I don't know. I surely haven't figured it out fully on the farm yet of what we're doing. You know, this week had a pretty easy, mellow week of just the standard grind. But we've been doing some microbes. And how's your IMO4 pile coming?
I think it's cooking along. Like, it's definitely one of the most beautiful piles I've ever made, because the soil's so different here. It's so moist compared to where I live. So it's just different in that it's really stayed steady at 118, 120 very consistently with no problem, and really doesn't drop down as much when it gets turned. There's a bigger gap in temperature to get it back up, and manipulation of the pile height, kind of where I live. So
here in Hawaii, it's a little bit different for you?
Yeah, for sure.
In like, what would you say, it's easier or harder?
Easier.
Easier.
Yeah.
What makes it easier here?
Well, I got kind of pitched a softball because the IMO3 was really great
Yeah, thanks,
to
thanks.
start. So, yeah.
And thanks to Donna Ray up, and Hope up, Donna Ray are up in Homer, Alaska, and Hope is now back in the Humboldt region of Northern California.
Nice.
And so they turned that pile, and I think they just did a magnificent job.
Yeah.
Started with a good IMO1 collection that we did under this bamboo right there.
Oh, nice.
And, when you... I don't know, when I get the really good IMO1 collections and they're so like more than just like the white fuzz, but it's almost like tempeh, how it's white and myceliated out in between.
Yeah, that cake. Yeah.
That's when I know. And I've actually been going like a day longer on my IMO1 collection to get even more of that really strong myceliated hyphae out, and waiting till the box is like tangibly warm.
Mm. Do you do multiple boxes when you do an IMO1 or just one at a time?
Typically just one at a time.
Okay.
And because I end up with too much IMO1. I only make so much IMO3, 4, and I have more IMO1 than I know what to do with right now.
Oh, interesting. Because I do multiple boxes, like 4 or 5 boxes at a time, just to ensure that I hopefully get a good collection. And then I check them. Sometimes I'll go day 5 and I'll open one and they'll be right next to each other. Then I'll open another one the next day until they seem ready.
So are they in the same environment?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're just putting multiple boxes to kind of increase your odds or something.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And then when you harvest it, you're making a determination of which ones you're going to use, or are you combining all those together?
Sometimes combining the parts, and I know I've been told that it isn't best practice to pick out the good parts, but that's kind of what I got. So sometimes it's a little questionable around the edges, and so there's a good, nice, white, fluffy part in the middle or on the side. So I just go for that. Get what you can.
Yeah, well, so on that, it's an interesting idea to pick out the good parts, so
Yeah.
to say.
Right.
To say, okay, I'm gonna go here and like I got this IMO and this center part's good, because those IMOs are all interacting with each other, and just because there's one good spot, it's that's an interesting idea. I'd really in my personal opinion on that, and I don't have much science and testing on this, but is to just get a really good single batch, like a really good, instead of trying to say, okay, I'm going to pick out multiple parts of these, because you're getting that box is creating a whole environment, and in those 5 to how long do you usually go?
It depends, 5 to 14 days, depending on the ambient temperature. So I can get some really gnarly color, if I let it go, or I miss picking
If you don't
it
get
up.
it at its peak.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's cooler, waiting that longer time, but in that same 5 to 14 days in that area, you're getting a whole, not just like, okay, this white spot, but that whole colony is reinforcing each other. And because what we're going for with the IMO is the soil microbes, it's really it's more of the community than where it's like, okay, like this spot is good. That's just my thought and thinking on it. So
Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever get the solid white. That's happened like twice ever.
so it's a little bit
It's
more
a
tricky.
challenge for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. How deep when you go, are you taking your box and putting it on the surface? Or are you physically saying, okay, here's the good dirt, and I'm going to dig down into this good dirt, place my box so I got really good connection down to the soil, and then to kind of cover that over?
Yeah, I find the mycelium, the one that's the 5 mil, and then I kind of scoot back the duff and then move the duff around the edges. So I don't like dig down into the dirt, but it's not totally on top either. So And then I cover it with grasses and whatever, if I find some leaf mold in the area, things like that, and try and keep it away from the wildlife. I don't have like a lot rats or anything like here, but it can be challenging, and hide it from humans.
Yeah, the humans. What is this rice? Throw it away. So, my suggestion is to actually, when when you're scraping away the leaf litter, right, and you're getting down, you're seeing the hyphae, and you're getting down into that moisture zone where fungal bodies are starting to grow, is actually penetrating down into that soil layer a bit, where you see the soil starting to kind of form good texture. Because if you're in a forest and you're under a leaf litter where leaves have accumulated, you'll notice that top bit of soil, and it depends how far down it is, but you'll notice a different texture where it's feeling like aerated. It's easier to dig with just your hands, type of thing.
Yeah.
And digging into that layer, because what happens is, as you dig into that layer, all those soil microbes that are living there, that are the soil microbes, not necessarily the leaf litter microbes that are above, but these soil microbes, as you dig into them, it disturbs them. And they all go, oh, what the heck? But then as soon as you put down that box of starch, all those microbes that have been disturbed and got their world rocked are now like, yay, and they want to jump up into your box. And so if you're digging down into it, you can insulate it better, but you're also getting more penetration to get those soil microbes and to motivate them to be like, hey, I got to translocate into this rice.
And I have seen you and Rayun like wet the area first. Is that right? I haven't tried that yet, but how has that been useful in other areas that aren't so wet for you?
Yeah. Well, if you're in a real arid environment, it really helps to moisten the area around your collection, and even putting like maintenance solution and spray that, not while you're doing your collection though, but to moisten it a couple days before and the day before, and then set your box. Because what that does is, the day before, you spray it like a couple days before, that activates that whole zone. All those microbes that are nearby all become very active.
Okay.
And then when you put the box, then if you re-moisten it right then, like during your collection, the microbes will be like, oh, it's great out here, why go to this box? But the box is like the last bit of moisture, the last bit of nutrition, the last bit of food after you've sprayed that, and then that moisture enables them to activate a little bit and to translocate into your box. So it's like a matter of getting the area moist and before you're going, because
like hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and water is life, so
Yeah.
So it makes it happen.
Right on.
So let's see here. So happy Sunday to everybody. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We even got James from Tanzania come in here.
Nice.
Patrick from Hungary. It's amazing. Tyler, okay, Oklahoma City. Stonemason up in Indiana. So it's cool, yeah. And J and K Triple G, he was watching a bunch of wild old Master Cho videos, so I saw some comments from him on some things. Okay, so Tyler is asking, or he's saying he's about to plant some raspberry, blackberry, blueberry, and goji berries. Sweet. He says, I'm going to plant top dress IMO4, I'm going to plant top dress IMO4, then the following week, but then some JMS. Any other suggestions?
Yeah, when you top dress with IMO4 or IMO3 on top, you sprinkle it, and then you should put mulch over it because it's UV sensitive. So that's really important to protect it from the sun.
Yeah, so mulching that, and then and of course doing all the soil foundation of, it's not just putting down the IMOs. The IMOs are like the workers, but then they need snacks to go to work.
Yeah, that's kind of the last thing I do, is sprinkle the IMO4. It's just to build up the soil. That's what I've been focusing on our farm the past 2 years, is regenerating the soil. And we all do that in different ways.
Yeah, but bringing the IMOs is to bring that life back, to put those guys, so that when you're not on the farm. They're on the farm doing the work for you, making your soil softer.
Yeah.
So, when you're doing your IMOs and you're putting them down, are you then coming back with liquids to water them into the soil?
Yeah, I use the liquid IMO a lot on top of that.
So you're putting down solid IMO and then even liquid IMO with other KNF solutions in there?
Well, I wouldn't call it solid because it's just a sprinkling, you know. So it's not like you're doing bag loads of it or anything, even though I have access to literally tons.
Well, I call it solid because it's like a dust, right?
Okay, yeah.
Versus like a liquid. It's not a liquid, so I call it like a solid. I mean,
I hear what you're saying. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, so then I come along and just use a watering can and just water the liquid IMO on top of that. And then put the straw or whatever you're going to use as your mulch.
So can I ask you a little bit about your experience in Idaho when you put down IMO versus non-IMO? What is the difference you're seeing from the areas you've treated with Korean natural farming and with the indigenous microbes?
Well, it's been a long road. So I've been mostly focusing on infrastructure and weed suppression. So I have seen a difference in the kinds of weeds that are coming up and the fertility of the soil. So it's still pretty, it's a new farm to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I've really been focusing on infrastructure and soil the past 2 years. And so this year I'm planting really heavily and gonna apply more applications. I've mostly been applying it to the potatoes and in the orchard.
And have you noticed any difference in moisture retention in your soil?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely need to talk to the guy that helps with the irrigation because how I build my soil and then what I'm doing with the nutrients, it's definitely a different watering timing and length than the other areas of the garden that other people manage.
So through your processes, Korean natural farming that you're doing to the soil, you've changed the soil's ability to deal with irrigation. So maybe it's holding more water now, and you need less frequent application.
Correct.
Is anyone else noticing?
Nobody else is there. It's just me. I mean, there's the church people doing their section, but they don't really mess with my stuff. So.
And they don't notice that, like, oh, it's like, oh, like, look, Cheryl hasn't irrigated and hers is kicking butt.
No, probably not.
Okay. You'll it'll get there one day when you don't have to do any irrigation. You're like, I don't have to irrigate. All these guys are still running irrigation.
That's what I'm building
and you're like,
towards.
hey.
Yeah, that's a lot of my doing the hugel mounds and different soil building and regenerative techniques to ensure that I don't need as much water year after year after year.
So there's a question here. Will lactobacillus digest pond muck? I buy bacteria pellets every year and they are expensive. So do you have any experience with lactobacillus cleaning up pond muck?
No. I've just used it to fluff up the soil, the LAB and the seawater.
Kind of as a soil conditioner kind of thing.
Yeah, pre-gardening. So to prep an area, I utilize that.
So I don't have a whole bunch of first-hand experience cleaning up gross ponds because I don't really have gross pond to test around me. I have done an experiment, however, using cut flowers in flower vases. And, you know, if you leave cut flowers in a flower vase after a week or so, you pull that out, oh, it smells like horse poop, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, it's just, yeah, you're like straight up in the horse's butt. Oh. You know, so
I don't know where you've been.
Well, yeah, I've had a horse back straight up into me and been right in that zone, and it's precisely the same smell.
Right. I'll trust you.
So my mom was like, hey, can't we apply some Korean natural farming to this? And so we tried all the different solutions, different combinations, different things by themselves, and we did a whole trial for like a month on different cut flowers around the house. Each vase had a different experiment in it. The number one solution that worked the best and actually extended, when you pulled the flowers out, it wasn't stinky and extended the flower's life by maybe a week, maybe a little bit longer, because they didn't rot the same way, was lactobacillus. I thought to myself, okay, maybe OHN would really help. You know, the KNF medicine, all those herbs would help suppress pathogens. Actually, what I found is that alcohol that's in there actually increased them. And when I took the flower vase water and put it under the microscope to see what happened at the end, the stinky waters all had little snakes in them. Like little, I'm not even sure they're nematodes. They might have been mosquito larvae. They were little like snake things. The only one that didn't have that was the lactobacillus. And so by changing the water texture, the biology, the nutrients that are flowing in there, those types of things, that was my firsthand observation of seeing lactobacillus like clean up what would be like stagnant water in a real controlled type of scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to work for St. Luke's in Boise, Idaho for 8 years, and I used to clean surgical equipment. And the first thing they taught me is sitting water breeds bacteria.
Right.
Like number one thing. And that's behooved me my whole life to recall that and just be aware.
And if the water's not in motion, like river water cleans, but like if you're sitting stagnant water, so the water quality you're using to start, and then on the cleaning up muck, I know there's a couple other things. There's a study in Japan where they cleaned up a whole bay, like a large area that was, you know, open to the ocean, and it was gross, and they threw or EM, so it has lactobacillus in it, also has yeast and purple non-sulfur bacteria, but they threw EM into the bottom in clay pellets. It cleaned up the bay, and they also did it on the island of Oahu. There's the Alawai Canal. It basically keeps, like Waikiki Beach used to be rice paddies and taro farms. And they built this canal to drain Waikiki Beach, and all that water sits in this really flat thing to drain out to the ocean, but it's very stagnant, got very stinky, and you couldn't even swim in there. And it used to be like the main place people would swim back in the 50s and 60s. And they threw EM balls to the bottom, and now the water's clear. Like you can see through it, and it's not. I still don't know like the water quality issues because it has a lot of pollution drainage because it's a city canal drainage. It's kind of a gnarly idea, but it's clear now, and it doesn't have that same odor coming out of it. So I've heard of, you know, lactobacillus being used in those things like regeneration besides outside of Korean natural farming.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and Cab talked a lot about that. So we got a question here from Rahim. How would you prepare an area which was a traditional tomato farm 10 years ago, but since has been used just as a pasture land for sheep?
Well, what are you trying to grow on it now? Like, what's your plan for that land? So that would make a big difference on how I would prepare it. If I was going to grow tomatoes again, would be different than how I would prepare it to grow potatoes.
True. Yeah, and in general, not knowing that, I generally try to get my soil foundations, like build the beds, whatever you're going to do, soil work, do it. Then put the IMOs down, then start to sow your crop, and sowing crops that are in addition to what I want to grow, things that are going to feed the soil and reinforce my other plants, and try to go from there. But just try to reset the land the way you want to head forward, and then from there start to build your soil foundation. And try not to till the land too much after you've got it set, and just continually build.
Yeah, that's good practice no matter what you're going to plant.
And I would say the sheep after the tomatoes, it's probably had enough rest to like come back to some um decent microbiome. With grazing animals, it all depends on how the management was, but that if you're just able to get the microbes back and kickstart it, that system should kind of restart itself. I would hope it's been rested enough under sheep and all that.
Yeah, there's a lot to that equation for different areas for sure. But yeah, agreed.
Hey, and then Mark's here from Santa Cruz. He says 2 years since he was here for his birthday. What's up, Mark? It must be your birthday again soon. Yeah,
My
I know.
birthday was on the 11th. It's part of why I'm here.
You didn't even tell me it was your birthday.
I went hiking with your mom.
I guess that's how it is.
We celebrated. It was awesome. It's a good birthday thing. Cool.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Mark. And then tomorrow is Master Cho's birthday.
What?
Yeah, he's a Valentine's baby.
I forgot. How could I forget?
So happy birthday to
Happy
Master
birthday,
Cho.
Master Cho.
All our February friends.
Yeah.
What is February? You're
Aquarius.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is an air sign.
Shouldn't it be a water sign?
You would think, but no.
Well, so yeah, so they say we're headed into the age of Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it couldn't be more true, because what does the world need? It needs somebody to take like big batches of JMS and walk and dump them out. Like the picture of Aquarius is like the guy like dumping out a jug of water kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's like, as we move from, I don't know, what are we in right now? What's before Aquarius?
Capricorn?
Are we in the age of Capricorn right now?
No. I mean,
No, the other way.
astrologically, that's what's before.
But I feel like the Aquarian age, and like the idea of like, I see either lactobacillus or JMS saving the world. Not to say that IMO4 isn't good, but it's so much harder to make, and it's so much more niche, and you're so much like, if I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna save the world, it like IMO4, it's like but JMS and lactobacillus and these other quick microbes,
Anyone can do it.
and I think that might be like our Aquarian age, like what we're headed into. It's like this age of the water bearer. It's the like the coming, the revival of the earth, the new paradigm is like this idea of like, water is life, but water with microbes, and when that hits the earth and then it regenerates, and this like, so I got a lot of hope in you Aquarians.
Yeah, I have been using the LAB and seawater on my lawn at home, and I've watered less and less.
So someone a couple weeks was asking yard care.
Yeah.
And so what's your yard care
I have
formula?
like a postage stamp yard, and in the 90s I tried to kill my yard. It was a trend. I don't recommend it. It just like turned into weeds, and but I did make some garden beds, and so those are still in place, and I changed them into hugel mound raised beds like 4 years ago. So I'm just doing everything I can to water less and less, because with droughts here and there, it's just important that we treat our precious water with respect and be aware of our usage. So, and to mention that I pay for that, whereas here you collect it, I pay for it.
Your water you're talking about?
Yeah. So I was looking at my water usage last year for my home was like 55,000 gallons or something. So yeah, like who knew? I was like, whoa, that seems like a lot, but I don't know compared to other households what that looks like. But I know all my neighbors, their sprinklers come on at 6 a.m. or whatever every day, and I water like once a week, maybe by hand. I do it by hand, and then I know how much water I'm using and for how long, and I can see the plants and if they're drooping and if they need it. I just keep an eye on all these things. and then try and utilize practices with the Korean natural farming to water less
Yeah, and
and
further.
more vigor, so that the grass is more thirsty when I get to it too.
And uptake all that too.
Yeah.
My thought on that is that, like in farming, we can reach a lot of people, but in yard care, it's like almost everyone has, wants a nice looking yard and wants to do less labor on it and wants it to
Yeah.
be nicer. And so there's a whole market of folks just, yeah, if you were I don't know. I mean, I always think in my mind of like a business idea of like you just drive down the road spraying all your clients, yards. People do that with compost teas and things, right?
Yeah, I do. And I do practice Korean natural farming with my landscaping clients.
You do.
I don't tell them. I just do it. I'm just like, they're like, yeah, do your thing. And I'm like, okay, cool. I don't charge them anymore because I have all that stuff already and I'm making it already. And for classes, I have inputs left over and I'm just kind of swimming in everything. So it's all good.
That's kind of like win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
They're getting a better product. You're building a better carbon buffer to absorb atmospheric poisons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I never know what I'm coming into either. And sometimes they don't either because they just bought a new house or whatever the situation is. Or it was their mom's and they're taking it over. And so they have no idea what's been applied. And so I just know that whatever it is I'm doing is probably better than what happened before.
Well, actually, one of the things if someone's been doing like say for instance, someone's used Scott's lawn care or whatever, I don't even know what's in those products, but they're really overloaded with a lot of synthetic nutrients that are there. And so if you've been doing that on your yard for say a decade or something, and it's like you've had all these things accumulate, and now you're starting to get problems because you've had like over fertilization problems and you're starting to kind of kill things off. If then you switch to IMOs, you restore that life, and then the IMOs are like, oh man, look, did you see all that like Scott's lawn care crystals hiding in the soil? And they start to kind of digest it. And so like you can turn what was like non-soluble problem causing over application into now like solubilized things that the microbes start to like bring and feed. So it's another like it's like an easy transition type of idea.
Yeah. If only the IMOs would eat weed barrier. People ask me to install a weed barrier and I pretty much refuse, but a lot of my clients have asked me to remove weed barrier because it doesn't really work where I'm at. The weeds blow in on top of the bark and stuff. Anyway,
what would be a weed barrier? Is that like a physical
yeah, it's like what you guys use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
and then people put bark and stuff on it and then the weeds come in on top of that. And so it's kind of pointless. And then you end up with these little pieces of plastic because it degrades.
Right.
And so then I have to remove that, dig around for it and find it, and to find all the pieces is like, ugh.
Yeah, and I'm just starting to use the black plastic a little bit, but the whole idea is that it's only there temporarily. It's not it's there and it's just there to kind of block and until I can get good mulch and good cover in, and then it's pulled out.
Yeah, I went to Rainbow Bridge Farm yesterday and they were using the plastic. I'm really plastic resistant. I'm like, try and convert me. Why should I do this? And then he showed me a field where they didn't do it and it's like totally overgrown grass. He's like, it would look like that. And I'm like, okay, that's valid.
It's a time labor, and we're in the era of plastic, so it's like you may as well embrace it as your balls move towards your butthole and you become a like we're degenderizing everybody is on a physical, like the plastic's actually getting into our body chemistry and actually feminizing males.
The xenoestrogens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a Joe Rogan on it. It's just wild. Afterwards, you're like, if you ever think of like microwaving and plastic again, you're just like, oh Coke and see my balls shrinking.
Yeah, I never heat food in plastic or hot food in plastic. Is no bueno.
And the plastic on the soil, I feel the same way, but I also I feel like part of it is like a drop in the bucket in terms of like there's so much plastic out there being used that if I use a little bit in a very smart and sensible and conscious way, it's a lot different than using it in a way of like thinking it's the future. Like I'm trying to use the plastic as a way to get me from where we're at to where this regenerative future, like use it as a launch pad versus thinking, okay, like for like I better order, 100 rolls of plastic because I'm going to be doing this during the next 20 years. That mindset of thinking like plastic's the way, I got to do it all this way, or thinking like, okay, how can I use this to build a system that'll be so resilient that I can get beyond it?
Yeah, I took a tour of Spring Creek Farm in Humboldt last month, and with Zelig is the owner, and he does JADAM. Yeah, good guy. And he told me he's been using the same cover for his light depth for like 10 years. I was like, okay, all right.
So he's able to reuse and yeah.
But I've been to many farms that have like dumpsters full of drip tape, and I'm just like, what are we doing?
Right. Yeah.
But you got to water somehow, so I got the not drip tape, but the drip line, and hopefully it'll last 10 years or more. Roll it up in the winter, put it out in the spring.
So can you go a little bit into the Zelig and your experience with that from the regenerative this year?
Yeah, so I went to Spring Creek Farms, and he uses the JADAM technique, and he's had two 55-gallon barrels of JADAM microbial solution, and one of them is mushrooms that grow in the forest, and the other one is just grass. And he takes about a third of each of those barrels and puts it into his, I think it's 5,000-gallon water tank, and then waters from that when he waters. And I'm like, so you don't filter it? And he doesn't filter it other than the bag that he puts inside with the product, and then puts a hose in through the bag, and then that's all the filter, and then all the other hoses are large enough that it's not going to get clogged.
Okay. Yeah. So his dilution again is like 50 gallons into 5,000?
No, the ones that he's had for 2 years are 55 gallons, but he uses a third of that.
Okay, so he's kind of keeping these seed batches of them, and those are microbes or the liquid fertilizer?
Well, probably both.
Okay. So, but he's trying. He has two 55-gallon drums. One of them is the mushroom, and the other is the grass, and those are kind of like breaking down / growing microbes as they sit, and those are he's trying to keep those for many years.
Yeah.
From that, he takes 1/3, so maybe like 10-15 gallons, and puts that into 5,000 gallons.
Yeah.
And then runs that out to the farm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's pictures of that on my Instagram from the tour. That's @earthpurse, EARTHPURSE, and it's not too far back. They're pretty recent.
Cool.
Yeah, there's like little mushrooms growing on top of because you get that film, and some of it's kind of oily, and then there's little mushrooms growing on top of the grass one, and then on the mushroom one there's like these little beetles eating away at it, so it's alive for sure.
Interesting. So those batches, as they kind of ferment and get more complex, and its own whole ecosystem happening there.
Yeah, it doesn't get any cheaper than that too. Like, this guy's down and dirty. He's like so happy to have found JADAM and met Master Cho and Youngsong and Williams a couple years ago, and found this new tech, and he's all about it. And when I smelled his product, he grows cannabis, and I stuck my nose in each jar, and I was like, wow, I've never smelled anything like this. It's just smelled so amazing. It's just really unique fingerprint. Like, and the terroir has a lot to do with, he's got free sweet water off the mountain. He uses the JADAM. He's got the pit tech with the living soil in his greenhouse. You know, there's all these factors that go into that. It's not just JADAM. It's not just one thing, but it's an amazing, amazing original product that I've never experienced before. It was just kind of blew my mind. Like, for real. It was just so off the charts different than anything I'd seen and smelled before. Like, the bar has been raised by a large margin in my mind of like what is acceptable product.
Yeah, interesting. Good. Yeah, no, I've seen and experienced many successful folks using these microbes.
Yeah, me too.
It's cool to see somebody do it with Young-Sung Cho's method of these just extremely low cost methods, and then still where you're saying they set the bar higher than anyone else. So his cost per performance ratio must just be incredible compared to what other people have.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and he told me, I don't know if I should say this live, but he's like, I needed to know where the line was where I didn't pass the test anymore. So he just like basically sprayed it right directly on the flower, just like with blobs of tea, and that didn't pass. He's like, I needed to know where the line was of like what wouldn't pass.
Right. Yeah, because that's kind of always one of the concerns with JADAM, is because it can be different biology in there. So having to test that and knowing where you lie on there is...
Yeah, that's important. If you got product with a barcode, gotta have it.
So there's a question here on rice. I would say use Calrose rice. Oh man, you guys chatted a whole bunch and I didn't scroll. Oh, and we got some...
We're chatting.
Okay, so just don't use brown rice. Pretty much any white rice that's been hulled. The reason not to use brown rice is that hull's still on there, and that's going to block your microbes from getting through and eating that easy starch. The whole idea is to give them an easy starch that once you've disturbed them, they want to translocate into that box. If you make it harder for them by having brown rice, you're only going to get the hippie microbes.
Yeah. I have used other things before. I've used oats because I talked to Elaine and she's like, why are you using rice? Use oats. And so I tried that and I did it successfully. And Preston Smith has used quinoa and different things like that. And you can. It's so much easier with the Calrose rice. It's kind of like a softball gimme. It literally is the easiest way to collect IMO1.
Yeah, because the texture is already done for you. I've done it with a bunch of different starches and always had to, chop things real fine or cook it so it doesn't get too mushy. And it's just like, oh, other rice, I set it. I take, what is that, like 4 cups of rice and 3.5 cups of water, put it in the Instant Pot, push rice button, done.
All right. Nice.
Okay, so somebody, GrowPro, hey, thanks. And also he kicked down some super chat stuff. That's always, thanks for supporting the show. Really appreciate it. That, keeps me alive and keeps Flat Eric alive. And, oh, yeah.
Oh, we got the dog formerly known as Prince. Oh, it's my traveling partner. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, so appreciate that. And yeah, our guys hanging out here. And so GrowPro is asking, can you use a saturated LAB to make a new batch? And the answer is yes. But the answer is that, yeah, sure, you'll make another batch, but each subsequent batch you're narrowing your family. The whole reason for Master Cho's recipe, the way he does it, there's a lot of different ways to make lactic acid bacteria, but his whole way of setting out the rice wash, then fermenting it with milk with a semi-breathable lid instead of an airtight, is because all these steps he's taking, he's maximizing diversity. At each step, he's trying to broaden that family as much as he can to get as much of the lactobacillus growing in there.
And it degrades over time.
Yep. And so if I'm going to start with a batch that's like an old family, it's not going to be the same as going out into the fresh world and collecting and getting this new, strong strain. And so the longer you kind of grow it and inbred it in batch after batch, your culture starts to weaken. And so that's why bringing in these wild batches, this broad diversity, is really helpful. So you can do it from an old batch, but it's, you know, preferable to collect fresh if you can.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I put cut lilies in fermented plant juice and lactic acid bacteria, and they rooted. I potted them up, and they grew baby bulbs. I'll email you photo. Oh yeah, cool,
Awesome.
cool. So yeah. So let's see. Okay, so Jairus is asking how to regenerate pastures that has sandy soil with relatively poor vegetation and has been used for a potato monoculture with synthetic fertilizers. I'm trying to avoid solutions that include plowing. So my advice is to turn it into last week's office hour, because I specifically went over that in like a use case and spent about half hour talking about that for a guy in Mexico. And his sandy soil, it's all messed up, and he needs to get it together. So recommend check out was it February 6th episode. Northern climate. Yeah, he's in Mexico, but it still should be very similar to what you're doing. And Fear Nuke is talking about tillage radish are good ways to break up soil. Yes, for sure. And grow them. Okay. We have tar spot on our maples, blight on apple tree, and tomato powdery mildew on lilacs. This is my first year spreading IMOs on our farm. Should I spray the whole place with JADAM sulfur first? Well, this is a good question, because this is like a spot of like, you know, I'm starting and I want to start. And what would you say?
I would say never, ever spray your whole crop with anything. Try one thing first and see how that goes. Because, you know, if it's wrong, then you've just screwed up your whole crop. So that's a big risk to do that. So always start small with anything that's new, especially. And, you know, like we were talking about yesterday, you don't start with 2,000 or 200 grit sandpaper, you know, like you could, but probably not a good idea. And I'm learning about the orchards and the different trees and all the different diseases that they have, and it's a steep learning curve for orchardry for sure, with the peaches and the apples and the pears, and they all get different pests and different diseases. And you know, there's the biodynamics has their own way of approaching it for healing wounds on trees, and then the Korean natural farming about spraying before the fruit comes on 2 weeks before, and there's all these different things to take into consideration, and there's a lot of good practices out there that are organic and natural. So how you run your own farm is up to you.
But I would say starting with a batch of JADAM sulfur, you know, that may not be the best starting point. I mean, it really depends on like how and what you got going. But I don't think that my ultimate way would be, instead of trying to go with a sulfur, which is more to like kill and knock back.
Yeah, it's intense.
Is to go with something like lactobacillus, like just the KNF protectors, and just spray that just as a start, and it may even be more effective than the sulfur. because the sulfur is going to knock back everything, including those diseases you mentioned, which you got, you know, 3 kind of gnarly things affecting you, which seems like, oh no, what am I going to do? But by using the sulfur, you're going to knock back not only those bad guys, you're going to knock back all your good guys as well. And so if you come in with the lactic acid bacteria instead and say, okay, those guys are going to go and eliminate the pathogens while reinforcing your good guys. And especially then as you start to incorporate other KNF solutions and bring in those other foods and the vinegars and the tinctures, all these things in, it's going to strengthen. And so as opposed to trying to fight the bad, which is like we always think, oh, those guys are bad, we got to destroy them and then everything will be good. The approach is to stay and said, okay, those guys are bad, like let's just bring more good guys in here. And if you bring in 10 times, 100 times more good guys, the bad guys aren't going to flex. They're just going to be like sitting there nice until the good guys leave. And if the good guys never leave because you're always applying more, the bad guys never get to express themselves and cause trouble.
Yeah, it's always a lot of post thinking of like, oh, this bad thing happened and now how do I fix it? Well, how about try and maintain a balance before and not get out of balance? That's the tricky part, and every environment is different. So what application of LAB and how many times might be different for you than for me, especially in a wetter area.
Well, even in his case, it may be different on his tomatoes than it is on his maple.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
You know, the tomato is growing so much faster. It's reproducing. It's going to need much more frequent treatment, versus the maple is, you know, out there and it's going to be much more seasonal dependent, I think, of when you do it. Like when your maple is going to go and flush, and then when it's going to go through its whole cycle of
dormancy.
Yeah. And so if you can time that with that on, you know, the tomato, you can have to do more but the maple, if you hit it at the right time, it could set it up so that whole year has the strength it needs that, you know, the tar spot on there may not be able to establish because the plant was able to get through that life cycle that it was having a trouble with, and you were able to ease its way through there, and then it may not express that problem.
Yeah, and depending on what I'm using it for, like when I use the LAB and the seawater for flocculation for soil, I do it right before it rains, whereas with this application, I would do it if it's not going to rain.
Yeah.
So it doesn't wash off. So be aware of your weather patterns.
That's huge too. Yeah. Okay, so in summer, things like alfalfa, hairy vetch, and mustard grow fast and make good chop and drop to add organic matter. Yep, for sure. And those are also decent things. You could ferment the mustard. The other things, good ground covers. Okay. Yeah, all these ideas that Fear Nuke has here of you know, buying green manure seeds real cheap and building soil prep and all these things it's great. It's like always tune into like the permaculture aspect of it as well. Yeah, these are some really good comments. Like, you know, if you're trying to restore old soil, or poor soil, the best way to do it is with organic matter and growing living plants, because those are putting those exudates, they're changing sunlight into sugars, which is feeding that biology.
I'm all about the cover crops. That's part of how I've been regenerating the soil at the garden, is just cover crop after cover crop after cover crop. But I'm really lucky. I can get a 50-pound bag of wheat berries for $7.
Yeah. Do you have any experience with Gabe Brown? Do you know him?
Mm-mm.
He's a polyculturalist out of South Dakota, North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the Dakotas, West Dakota. So after you get past Butte, you're in West Dakota. Yeah, no, but yeah, he has some interesting things with polycultures and cover crops. Yeah, and I hear you on the don't justify plastic. No, I'm not. Okay. Okay. So this Jairus is saying, I really like the idea of KNF, but I struggle to find good source of recipes of how to make them and how to use them, but extended version of that. Any suggestions?
Well, there is a lot of misinformation on the internet. There's just more and more people putting out videos, and some of them are bad. I said it.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally true.
So yeah, mind your source. And Drake's videos are good. Chris's videos are good, but I've heard people that have made videos prior that say that they need to remake them just because of the experience that they've had since they've made the videos. It's been a long time since they've made the video for OHN or LAB or whatever, and there's just improvements that could be included. So, we're all learning.
Yeah, source, if you're on this YouTube, check my channel. There's tons of stuff. It's somewhat hard to find because it's not necessarily ordered, but knfsupport.com, sponsored by the Pure KNF Foundation, which sponsors these office hours, and that is now pretty darn categorized, and it questions, answers, the office hours. You can search through them, find all
You
these
got the
kinds of
indexes.
answers. Yeah.
That takes some effort, so I
Oh, yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing that. I was like, wow, that's really kind.
It ain't easy. I mean,
No.
no, it takes a lot of effort to put this out, and I'm trying to reach as many folks as possible. So
Yeah, that helps a lot.
thank you.
It's significant, so
Yeah.
that's a good tool.
Yeah.
I know everybody appreciates that. Trying to find information is like a needle in a haystack sometimes, so it's important.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Stonemason. Thanks for helping out here.
Thanks, Stonemason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always good. Oh, okay. Man, we got a lot of questions in here that we could get to. Looks like you guys are. So, yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, so we got through cheese. Whey is lacto and all that. So yeah, Juris is saying here he's making a market garden and he's using 100 goat manure to do this. I would just say, if you can get some of the IMOs into your goat manure and make a little bit of compost and get that going with your microbes, you'll have good results, and that'll help out. The more you can incorporate microbes, I think the better off you are. Have you ever run into a situation where you've caused damage using natural farming? So me either.
Not yet, but I haven't tried.
Well, the only time I've ever seen problems, like for instance, like, so say I dilute wrong, like just, if I, but no, I've never seen it cause problems. I've never had over microbes. There is, so since you mentioned it, you talked about IMO 1 or 2, like the seed IMO causing a fungal infection. Do you want to talk about that at all? Just like,
Well, it got sprayed into my mouth. So, yeah, I got a fungal infection in my mouth for like 3 months, and so did the other person.
okay, so
Yeah.
so hearing
No
what
limo in the mouth.
yeah, so hearing what Cheryl said here of just, be careful of this being on your person or ingesting it into your body. But in the plants and in things,
Yeah.
I've never seen Korean natural farming cause problems for me using these solutions.
Yeah, I've started wearing a mask when I do the liquid IMO, just especially when I'm like cleaning the brewer and stuff like that. And I did start getting fungal infections like under my armpits and under my breasts, and so I had to take an antibiotic for that, which I hadn't done in years and years. It was like I was just handling it way too much between teaching classes and doing the farm and just making it all the time. So, yeah, I'm trying to be more aware of that.
Okay, and then
PPE.
yeah, totally. And then here's the thing that says just make Elaine Ingham style compost, and I just wanted, what are your thoughts on that type of comment, and just like, what do you?
Sounds great. Do that. I mean, I was talking to Elaine at the regenerative conference, and I'm like, well, you can make 100 batches of compost, even trying to do it Elaine's style, right? But in reality, two of those batches are going to turn out. That's just how nature is. Like, we can go and try and get a perfect IMO collection, but literally 1 out of 20 for me is really where it's at. Like, you know, it's the bomb diggity. So, you make 100 batches of Elaine Ingham's compost, and really only 2 to 5 of them are going to be right on, like right on, because there's so many factors involved, and the seasons are always changing, and the moisture content is always, everything's always ever changing. And so it's all natural and organic, and we just got to roll with it and do the best that we can. Sure, we can try and do that to the best of our ability, but things come up, and families have issues, or kids need to be picked up from school, or whatever happens, and we just all do our best. And that's ideal. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what is your best is your best. You
Right.
can't do any better.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, so in terms of composting versus the IMO process, which do you prefer in I mean, or
I love
you do
them both
and they
in
both
different
fit in,
ways.
right?
Yeah. So right now, I've been composting at home for many years. So I worked at the Boise Co-op for 18 years, and I bought my house when I was 22 in 1992, and then I started working there in 96. And they put all this produce culls out by the dumpster, and then people would come and pick whatever was good in the neighborhood. That people would go like, "Oh, that apple's still good. I'll cut off the rotten half," like. Gotta do what you gotta do. And it's nice that they would leave it out for people, but then whatever was left from that, they would put it in the dumpster, and it just like hurt my heart. And I was like, I can't bear to see that going in the trash. And so I started taking it home, 5-gallon buckets at a time, and then pretty soon I was up to like 40 gallons a week.
Wow.
Like, between that and a juice bar that I hooked up with, and I just really got into composting. And so
That's good resources.
Yeah, for sure. And most of it organic, so that's the bomb. And I just can't stop. So now I'm at the Vineyard Boise on the 3 acres where Chris used to teach his classes, and I'm doing compost windrows with the tractor, which is challenging to like turn compost windrows with the bucket. It's like a whole nother level of composting, right? And then when he taught his classes, I would get the 2 tons of IMO3 left there given to me, and so I've turned that into IMO4 and then IMO5, and so it gets bigger exponentially due to the recipes, right? And so that's been a challenge too. But when you get to IMO5, it kind of is like fermented mixed compost, but it's fungally dominant fermented mixed compost. And so I have used that to seed my compost windrows too, and also the compost from my house, because I have worms in my bins there. And so I take like 5 gallons of worms from my house bin and inoculate the windrow down the row on each side, and then water it in really good. So
like kickstart it and
I'm
really
just
get it
using
going.
what I have. Yeah.
Cool.
But I love it all. So
Cool. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about the Snake River Seed Cooperative?
Snake River Seed Cooperative. That's the seed cooperative in my region, and the region goes actually all the way down to Salt Lake City. So there's there's a garden down there my friend James Loomis has been managing for quite some time. That's an amazing program that grows seeds for the Snake River Seed Cooperative. And if we do a class in Boise, then we'll definitely take a tour of the seed bank. And they had a seed day, and I got this seed saving zine. And I think seeds will save the world. It is our future to save the seeds from your garden. and in your area, and share those with others and share the love. This is going to save the world right here. These are skills we all need. Saving our own seeds and sharing them with our community in our area, just for our region. It's super important to me, so I'm on that wheelhouse now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And sometimes saving your seeds sounds easy, but like tomatoes are a real pain in the patootie.
Yeah.
So each vegetable has its own way of saving its seeds that's different. Like pumpkins is different than corn, is different than tomatoes. So, it's like another project. I know we all have a lot to do on our farms, but if you don't have to buy seed and you can save your own and just keep it rolling stronger and stronger and intermix with other people that you know and trust, then that's really good. And we do that with our worms in my community, of like because you don't want to interbreed for too long, and so we worm swap. So we get stronger, healthier communities.
Don't want them to get too slow.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. And if people want to find you and find out more what's happening in the Boise or KNF region.
Yeah, a lot of my Korean natural farming journey is on the Instagram on @earthpurse, EARTHPURSE. And then my farm is called Seeds of Hope Boise on Facebook. And then I've started using a new platform, Hive, to kind of monetize some of my content into crypto.
Cool.
So I'm just kind of playing around with that. It's a new thing for me, but we'll see.
Yeah, Mark was mentioning the crypto here. What kind of cryptos are you into? Bitcoins? Shiba Inus? What do you got?
Let's not go there.
No. It's always fun. It's always
La la la.
Yeah, no, I can't hear you. I can't see you. I can't even type. I don't have thumbs.
Money. Yeah, I don't, it's a tough one. Like, I don't want to have to monetize stuff, but I got to pay my bills and pay my mortgage and pay for supplies. And, there's a lot of talk around selling KNF inputs, whether that's good or not good, or, to loose terms. But it's like, literally the money I make from selling OHN, I buy new herbs to make OHN and the vodka, because it takes a case of vodka to make OHN. I know. And if I keep teaching classes, it's like it's things that I have to have. So, but I am swimming in OHN. So if anybody wants to buy OHN, hit me up. It's the good stuff.
Yeah.
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 And it's just to get people started, really, because it takes 3 months. So while they're stirring to the right every night, they can have some to utilize. It's not like you need a lot, right? It's 16 ounces or whatever will get you by for quite a while, depending on the size of your farm. So,
or how much you drink personally.
Or how much you drink personally. Do the challenge.
Cool. Well, anything else you want to add?
There was a question that we talked about. Someone sent me personally yesterday about flowers.
Yeah.
So let's see if I can pull that out.
Yeah.
Adam Solar. I haven't. Solar Adam.
And so if you guys want to reach me questions, Drake at pureknf.org is my email, DRAKE at pureknf.org. And we'll be up doing it next week. Looks like we're about 10 minutes over today, but it's nice. Beautiful day here in Hilo. Thank you guys for tuning in. We got one more question here. Let's see. I'll try and reform my addiction to plastic. Thank you. Good. You got it?
So Adam asks, I really need help with some maintenance sprays and what to use with my cut flowers. No one seems to have an answer. I have an idea. All the literature is focused on taking the plants past bloom into fruit, etc., but stopping or slowing the progression to fruit or seed and maximizing bloom longevity and quality is what I'm aiming for. Yeah, and I totally get where he's coming from. If you're doing cut flowers, you want them to be pretty as long as possible, right? And their vigor and color and all that to sustain, especially if you're taking them to market. So it's a good question.
Well, one thing I would say is lactobacillus is helpful in terms of even some sort of like after, like in your cutting process, however they're coming in, you know, like when you're misting the flowers to keep them like nice and if you could put a little LAB in there just to get that on there. Any foreign material that's on the flower surface is immediately after you cut it is going to start to decay that flower. If you're able to spray the lactobacillus on that, it's able to impede all those decaying processes. So by treating with lactobacillus post harvest, you may get some longevity. Again, this comes down to like if it's on the stems and you're taking your cut flowers and putting them into water, put the lactobacillus in there. And as I talked earlier, I was talking about the cut flowers and the lactobacillus. They're 2 peas in a pod. In terms, so that's post treatment. That's getting, you know, your flowers out to the customer. Prior to that, growing, the one thing to do is, we discussed about this earlier, is something that's outside of the 9 core solutions, but is phosphoric acid. And that is one of the solutions that I talked about actually last week, kind of in detail and in depth, and went into the recipe on it. But what that does is phosphorus helps things flower. Phosphorus is like light, like phosphine means like light, and that really helps that same brightness. Like the flower is like this burst, like a flash of light, this beautiful color, this and that phosphorus helps all those processes, those biological processes that helps that happen. And the phosphorus really helps the flower to bloom and then get those more aromatics and those things coming through.
Yeah, I'm learning so much more just hanging out with the cannabis people about different terpenes and different flavonoids. And I mean, there's all this whole spectrum of fragrances and different things that apply to every plant, really.
In that case, in the cannabis, different fruit juices that you use, the can of foods that you make from fruits, and they can add whole different flavor profiles as well, which is slightly different than cut flowers. But you could even still, if
and color, right? Too.
All those things.
Yeah.
And really, you know, towards the end when it's starting to bloom and finish out, if you add the calcium to it, it helps to translocate these things, and that's the calcium in the seawater is what adds the flavors and all these subtleties. And it's really to answer that question, it's really the more you do the basic practices, the better your foundation will be. And then the more you can get into those fine practices of adding these other solutions, like with precise timing, knowing, okay, I'm going to harvest in 2 days, and then you're able to get out and to spray that day. That's when you're going to get this cutting edge that sets you apart from the rest of the competition, because only these types of solutions have these plant secondary metabolites or whatever they are, these complex compounds in the KNF solutions. Whereas if you're trying to do any other synthetic type of thing, they're not there. And so that translocation, if you took some other product from something and you spray 2 days before harvest, it's not going to have the same effect as if Korean natural farming is sprayed 2 days before, because it's all water soluble. It's all in the order the plant wants, and it's able to bring those in and incorporate into, add more aroma, more compounds, more flavors, everything.
It's real bioavailable.
Instantly.
Yeah.
And it's the only, it's, you know, it's one of the few products I know out there that it doesn't have to change. Like the same, it's like, you know, it comes, it's put into a solution and then it's sprayed back on the plant, and there was no transformation in that process of, versus the other way, you're getting synthetic chemicals, you're trying to like balance something and then it's going and assembling it. It's much more of like a
process. Multi-step process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to figure out what to do with it.
Right. Yeah. It's like getting pieces versus products. It's like some assembly required, you know. And it may not even be cheaper.
Definitely, that's kind of the way it's going. Definitely not cheaper.
So yeah, I would just say continue to do, and then add those fine tweaks in when you can. And but again, Cheryl and I talked about this, and it was this sandpaper analogy of don't try to start with 220 polished when you haven't done the basics of like the 80 grit of getting your soil microbes, getting your basic nutrition in there. Yeah. Don't try to like be like, oh, I want better cut flowers and go with the 220 sandpaper. Like start with the 60 or 40 grit on your grinder and get the basics done.
Yeah, I like that. It's awesome.
Cool.
All right.
So with that, thanks for tuning in.
If I could say, if you're interested in taking a Korean natural farming class in Boise with me and potentially Jake and maybe Elaine, we're working on it, and Flat Eric and the dog formerly known as Prince. Oh. Send me an email at growmoresoil@gmail.com. GROMORESOIL@gmail.com, and I'll get you on the email list for future classes. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks for having me.
Well, cool. Yeah. Love. Can we do it? Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, it's been done.
All right.
Okay, love you guys.
Opposite.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha.